Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Not too bad. Sunny Arizona.
Sunny Arizona. I'm so jealous. So today I have Michael Woudenberg on with me on Finding the Magic book podcast. So I'm very excited to learn all about you and your book.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Do you want to jump in and tell us? I don't know. Do you want to start from the beginning or the end?
Let's start with the beginning. I can kind of jump in and give a quick overview. So it's my debut novel. It's the tagline I like to share is in the battle over advanced AI, will we lose our humanity or learn what truly makes us human? And so it's fundamentally it's science fiction meets science fact, and trying to so I do technology as my day job, and technology integration. One of the biggest things right now with AI is what bothers me is how people are reacting to it without really understanding what makes humans unique. And so they're reacting to it in so many different ways that I think are actually creating the problems that they fear mostly. And it's like, for me, it's kind of like when you understand who we are, there's a lot less to fear about AI.
Right. Yeah. There is a lot of chat about, but really, and I won't even claim to know, like, I know this much about the 100% of AI, but, it really seems to me that what you get generated, like if you just do chat GPT and pose a question, is something that may be factual, but it's so void of those human linkers that you would normally see in human writing, that you really have to rewrite it, including those facts, to make it sound like a human wrote it.
Well, and I think that you introduce an interesting problem is that a lot of the times when I see people, and LinkedIn is like great for, getting the pulse on this, but when people are freaking out about AI and I go and I look at their writing, there's probably a reason they're freaking out about AI, right? The people that are the most worried about it are the most likely. Like, it's sort of like journalists. Journalists right now are actually pretty terrible. They're very formulaic, and they actually have what is best described as an ad libs style. So they take an AP thread, quick little blurb from the AP, and they do ad libs into their whatever their thing is, and then they spit out an article in 5 minutes. And well, guess what? AI can do that in a heartbeat. Like, give it the ad lib mantra and the little verbiage that you want, and it can do that. And so I think to a one degree, a lot of writers are rightfully worried because they are very derivative. However, within actual authoring, like truly generating interesting content and the plots and the twists and the dives and the digs, AI cannot do that. Not to go too long on this but people like to ask, when I wrote a novel about AI, did I use AI to write the novel? And the answer is the simple answer is no. I can honestly claim all the words are mine. However, I used AI to kick it off. So when ChatGPT 4 came out, I was like, okay, I'm gonna pay for the thing, and I'm gonna help it get me off the blank page. That was my biggest issue, because this book has been in my head for 5 years. So I used ChatGPT to kick it off, and I can honestly say it was terrible. It was horrible. It was just clunky and bad, but it got me off the blank page, and it helped me start to write. And then I can honestly say that, I was able to find my own voice. I was able to weave the concepts together, and I used AI throughout the book as an enabler. Scene generation, like there's a chapter 5 is the title is kintsugi. It's this Japanese art where they take like a broken pottery and they reform it and they mend it with gold inlay. And so I have Kira in a Japanese tea house. Well, okay, I'm writing, I'm in the middle, I'm like, crap, I have to like describe this Japanese tea house correctly. Well, I could have done all the research, looked through the pictures, done all that different things. Or I asked ChatGPT, describe, here's the scene, describe a Japanese tea house, and it came up with it, and I was able to move it. Now, it was definitely a shortcut, but what it also did is it kept my momentum in writing. I was able to grab that, stick it in, work with it, keep the momentum going, finish the chapter, go back, edit that section, go back and do the analysis, but I didn't get stuck, have to take a break, do the research, and then have a very difficult time getting back going again.
Right. Yeah, I can see that because you're right. Like I have lots of ideas for novels, and half the time it's like, yeah, starting the plot, where's the book going to start out? Um, where's it going to go? What the twists are going to be? What's the highs and lows? And yeah, just getting how many words did AI initially give you? Just as a frame of reference.
I mean, less than I asked for. I think I got about 500 words
Oh,
when I did an original,
okay.
because at that point in time it was limited. It wouldn't kick out 1,000 words of prose.
Okay.
It would do about 500 words, and but again, it kind of got me off the page, or the blank page anyway, and then able to keep that momentum going.
Very cool. Well, yes, and 500 words is nothing, right? When you think about, I don't know how long your novel is, but most novels are going to be at least 60, 70,000
Right,
words, up to 100, 120,000 words
right,
sometimes. So 500 words, you can write that in 5 minutes, but
right.
it's just that, like you said, the instigator. And the only, I haven't done tons of research, but like there was one author that like writes very formulated cozy mysteries,
Hmm.
and so those genres like cozy mystery, sweet romances, I haven't heard as much about in the sci-fi fantasy world because I feel like those aren't as formulaic. But if you don't hit certain plot points in those, then the reader's like, I don't like this book. This wasn't what I was expecting, right? If I
Right.
pick up a cozy mystery, I want it to follow this formula. So AI in that instance, she was like, yeah, I put a town in there. I put, the character, in a basic, this was how the murder happened,
Hmm.
and it can spit out, well, now I think it's better, but it can spit out like 30,000 words of her
Mm.
90,000 word,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
60,000 word book, and then she can add in all the human relationships and more plot twists, and she writes the book a month that way, and that helps her get where she wants to be. So
Well,
I don't think that's
yeah.
totally wrong.
Well, and when you're writing literally a book a month, and the type of audience, and that's what's interesting in the authoring world as I've gotten into it. So I do a lot of nonfiction writing on Substack. So a lot of when I wrote this book, a lot of the topics, like I mentioned, that was a different conversation, not on this one. So I do a lot of nonfiction writing, and then those topics get woven in. So for instance, I have an essay that I wrote on Substack. So it's polymathicbeing.com is my Substack. But I had an essay, a friend of mine just randomly was like, hey, so, what do you think? Can AI be creative? I was like, I don't know. It's a good topic. And he's like, well, why don't we ask AI? And so we ask AI. So we're just on a phone call. And then he's like, well, okay, can AI write a sonnet on a topic for which no sonnets exist? Was one of the prompts I gave it. And so I prompted ChatGPT, and it came back with a sonnet on quantum mechanics. But what was interesting is kind of so that was part of a conversation, but then I wrote an essay on, can AI be creative? But what you have to fundamentally define, what is creativity? And then you have to understand, how creative are humans? And humans are actually very derivative, or at least incrementally creative. So we base it. So, when people ask, what influences my book? Well, Orson Scott Card is a great influence on my book. I definitely read his prose and kind of studied it. Another one is a fantasy web serial known as The Wandering Inn, written by an anonymous author, or pseudonymous author, I should say, Pirate Abba. Anyway, she actually had some prose and some styles that I diligently studied to weave into the book. And so anyway, this essay, this nonfiction essay on Can AI Be Creative, actually gets woven into chapter 3 of my fiction book, because Kira, the main protagonist, is studying AI in college, and so they're exploring, can AI be creative? And so it's just kind of fun to kind of weave those back and around and through. But back to your author story, is that humans really do like that formula. Like the hero's journey is a archetypical formula that exists in almost all of the ancient mythologies of this journey. I mean, it even emerges in the Bible. Like the entire Exodus story in the Bible is a hero's journey archetypically. So we do like our formulas. It really makes a big difference. The challenge is, how do you become so formulaic, or avoid being so formulaic that AI can completely replace you?
Right. Yeah, we could probably talk about this for a whole hour, but I do want to jump into talk to me more about your book, about Kiera, the main characters, the plot line.
Yeah.
What are we going to experience?
So let me step back 5 years ago. I mentioned it took me 5 years to write the book. So I was part of a group that was called Mixed Mental Arts. And the idea there was, grappling with the complex problems of life and fundamentally learning what it meant to be human. So, we like to think we're rational beings, for example, but there's a great book by Jonathan Haidt called The Happiness Hypothesis, where he likens it to, our rationale is like a human riding an elephant, and the elephant represents who we really are, which is the emotions. Now, from the brain perspective, our prefrontal cortex is actually a late evolving addition, and that's our logical center. But all information, eyes, ears, nose, all your senses go through your low brain into your midbrain, then to your prefrontal cortex. So for instance, if I come up behind you and I clap my hands and I startle you, everything has already affected long before you realize that Mike, the rational brain kicks in. Your heart rate is already elevated. You've broken out into a cold sweat. Your startle instinct has been activated. You're primed for fight or flight. And then you finally realize that it's Mike being an asshole. So, but that's important to know, that all of the things get cycled through these layers long before your rational can handle. So your reasoning is a rider on an emotional elephant. So chapter 20 is actually called Elephant Riding. And it's kind of the penultimate, step of realizing how to create a cognizant and actually, let's say, human equivalent AI, is balancing that emotion with reason. Anyway, all that to say, this group, Mixed Mental Arts, gave me these ideas. And one of the thoughts I had then is, how do I make these more accessible to the general public? Like, no one really likes reading nonfiction psychology. So how do you make it entertaining and insightful? And so those concepts get woven through the book. Like I said, I write a lot of nonfiction essays. Those kind of bake in there as well. So, how do you make science fiction meet science fact? How do you underpin that? So the entire adventure follows two siblings, Kira and Noah. And their father starts off as he's an advanced AI researcher, and he's trying to capture their mother's essence, let's say. So their mother dies of cancer, and so she gets uploaded, or who she is gets uploaded. But then how do they animate that? Then when they animate it, how do they actually make it human-esque, right? So you're capturing the full essence of what it means to be human in an AI. And then what are the consequences to that? So Kira follows her father and is an AI researcher, and Noah is he's the protagonist antagonist. Fundamentally, I want people to end the book not being sure which side they want to select, because Noah wants to return humans more to a more natural way from the advanced technology. And so there's that positive tension between Kira pushing forward to animate her mother, and then Noah resisting that throughout the book, all the way through to the climax.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you said how did they upload her mother? That's where I'm not stuck. Is
Well,
it
not to give
great for
okay,
her
not to
to
give away too much. So there's so we kind of capture some of that. So even like chapter 2 is kind of puzzling that. So you've got memories, right? I actually get into the memories later when they go to actually animate her. So let's just say you can map the memories, right? But the memories are only one part of your memory, right? Your entire endocrine system, all of your hormones actually play a role in your memory. So you think about it, think about that the most embarrassing moment you've ever had in your life, right? The one that, as you're falling asleep, you think about and you go, oh, you twitch, right? Well, that twitch and that feeling in your stomach is actually part of your memory. Your memory is one element of it, but your memory actually also includes the rest of your body. And so one of the things that they were working on is capturing the endocrine system to map that into the memory system. Because otherwise you just kind of have emotionless sort of behaviors in that sense. So trying to understand how those memories work, and so capturing both of those was essential to the capture of the mother. And then when they animate the AI, one of the challenges is they animate the rational, logical AI, but they didn't animate the emotional side of the house. And so, like I said, elephant riding is at the kind of the penultimate point. Is they figure out how to solve the problem. They figure out how to fuse the emotional module into the rational module to complete the entire human essence.
very cool. Yeah, I can see there's a lot of like biotech merged with electronics and mechanics here too.
Well, I mean, there's a fun topic that most people don't even realize. It's called psychobiotics, and it's how integral your gut health is with your brain health. So, for instance, right now, a lot of people, specifically women, but also men, are suffering high rates of anxiety. And what they're finding is that our diets are too sanitized. And so there's not enough, our gut biome isn't developed enough. And so our intestines are in distress. And though the intestines in distress are sending signals saying, warning, 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 something's wrong. Now, throughout most of evolutionary history, that meant your water was bad, your food was bad, and you would get up and you would leave. You would go somewhere else. You would migrate to a different location where you could be healthier. But in today's environment, it's idyllic. We look around, there's nothing out there threatening us. Yet we're getting these signals in our brain saying there's a threat. And yet we're not going to move, we're not going to relocate, we're not going to do all these different things. And so we get anxiety.
Interesting.
And
Yeah,
so I had a friend,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, no,
No,
I
go
had a
ahead.
friend who was prescribed a probiotic for her anxiety, and it worked.
Yeah, I totally believe that because now I was just reading an article. They just linked Parkinson's to gut health and that they could
Hmm.
tell 10 years before someone started getting symptoms of Parkinson's just based on gut biome and gut health. And
Well, I
that
mean,
leads to this one
yep,
chemical that is lacking that affects the brain, um, how the brain works, for lack of a better
100%,
term. But yeah,
100%. And there's actually an interesting one is um like humans evolved, the big brains we have are incredibly resource intensive, and they evolved um, eating animal fats, high fat diets. And so in the 1980s and 90s, when we had the low fat movement, um, heart healthy is actually brain unhealthy.
right.
And so while the heart might have been slightly healthier, we had an explosion of Parkinson's and other things. So a combination of, yeah, your gut chemicals as well as the plasticity that you get from consuming the right amounts of fat.
Fun.
It's the body. Fundamentally, our human body is so complicated that we don't even quite realize the connections.
Right. Yeah. Um, and I'm just glad I still get to eat my pepperoni on my pizza. So tell
Pepperoni's
us what's
delicious.
next for you. You have this debut novel out. Is it a series or is there
Yep.
another book in the works?
So I have it's book one of the Singularity Chronicles. So this one kind of follows, advanced AI and its creation kind of that creates a split in the end. One split follows kind of a more naturalistic human arc, and the other follows the advanced AI into the future. And so so I anticipate four more books. I'm actually kind of neck deep in writing book two, which follows the AI arc. So it's going to follow the AI arc. And it's book two is called Integration. So book one kind of explores what does it mean to be human? What is the brain health, gut health? How do we cognate? How does our brain think so we can capture that into an AI? And then what are the consequences of that? Book two is going to follow the AI, and it's entitled Integration. And so it's going to tackle some pretty complex topics like, what does it mean around, when you're divorced from a corporal body, what does race, gender, and culture matter? Does it matter when you don't have a body? Like, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man when you're divorced from a body that would have those sorts of things? And so trying to figure out how do you take all of these essences that are captured and integrate them? How do you create a society of AIs that is divorced from physical bodies? So there's some really interesting challenges to poke apart on that one. And then book two is actually going to go back to the human side. I call it, it's currently titled Rebirth. And then so, humans kind of reset, they get rid of the technology. Can they avoid the cataclysm again? Like, can they learn the lessons from what happened and rebuild a society that doesn't implode the way Paradox does? And then book two is going to follow the humans again, and it's called Hope. And then book two of the human side, so that would be book three. No, now I'm getting complicated. And then book five, the final one, is going to go back to the AI. So these two arcs actually kind of parallel each other, and then intersect in book five as going forward. So it's going to be
Oh,
kind of
interesting.
fun.
So it's sort of like an not alternate history, alternate future.
Mm-hmm.
Like one way, I'm assuming the girl that Kira that
Yep.
researching the AI is going towards the AI side, and Noah
Yep.
is going to be the
Yep.
guy that goes to the human side. And are is it going to come back together at some point?
It'll come
Okay.
back together. I have a fun little tie-in at the end on what happens. And then the arc can kind of, if I decide to write more, I can continue that sort of path. So what's going to be interesting is clearly the AI side is going to be, classic science fiction, but the human side is a weird one because it actually becomes kind of an alternative history. So I view that one as being more like a fantasy, think almost like steampunk sort of, alternate of what it could be, because I get to rewrite. So long story short, give away a little spoiler on this one. The humans basically decide to reset to the middle Bronze Age. So get rid of technology, get rid of all these different things. So book the Rebirth is going to start where the humans they've reset effectively 4,000 years. Rebirth is going to hit it at about 2,000 years in. So think High Roman, and then book four is going to hit them 2,000 years after that. So think like mid 1800s style, not where we're at now, but a little 100 years ago. Anyway, that's kind of where we're going with it. So it's going to be interesting because they're going to be almost two different genres, and then they're going to arc back together.
That sounds really cool. I'm definitely gonna buy your book after this, and probably buy one for my daughter who's really into quantum computing and all that. She understands it much more than I do. So anyway, suffice to say that I think that will be her wheelhouse. Very
Oh,
cool.
cool.
Yeah, and the human arc almost sounds a little bit dystopian, like the society is broken and now they're resetting to rebuild almost. So
Well,
would you
Paradox is
categorize it?
dystopian. Well, so
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting. So Paradox is well, not dystopian. Paradox is apocalyptic. Um, Rebirth is actually not going to be dystopian. because they they don't have too much of a memory of the fallout. It's not going to be like Mad Max survival. It's actually going to be high Roman, high civilization at that time, redevelopment and growth as so maybe alternative history versus dystopian. It's actually going to be, rebirth and hope are both, what would you say? Oh, I'm drawing a blank of the word, like aspirational.
Okay.
So
Right. The people have decided they don't want the technology and they're going back to this. So it's a conscious
right,
decision
and
to
then
live that way.
oh, there you go. See, I'm gonna have to share now. Ugh.
Ah.
She's sleeping on my computer, so every once in a while my computer starts overheating, so I have to remove the cat from it.
Yeah, I don't know if it got too hot or what, but
Anyway, no, so I would say the human arc books 3 and 4, Rebirth and Hope, are going to be aspirational versus dystopian. Now, whether or not they can actually avoid the cataclysm that occurred in Paradox, as they go forward, is yet to be determined. But again, kind of, so the fun topics that we're going to explore in that one is, if you could reset, what would you do differently than what our history had? And in a large way, how different can you be when you're still stuck in a human body?
right. And human, human nature, there's so many vast personalities and goals, and somebody's going to have a goal that doesn't align with everybody else's goal. It's
Right,
bound to happen, right?
right.
Maybe in an AI world that doesn't happen, but in a human world it always does. So I'm
Yeah,
not
we're kind of, yeah, we're definitely, we're a conscious being programmed, and this is a lot of the topics we explore in Paradox is, what do you have control over, in being human? What things, are you unconscious of that, dramatically impact how you even interpret the world? And yeah, so resetting humans is going to have to explore how much can we reset, how much can we intentionally change, and what is kind of underpinning of human nature.
Yeah, this sounds like a treasure trove of like issues to think about.
And that's one of the beauties of it, though, is, some of the topics that we're grappling with even now, in our current political zeitgeist, become so inflammatory that if you were to write them as nonfiction, it becomes, clickbait, like just triggers. Yet in science fiction, you can explore these topics a little bit, because truly, what does, I've got my desk is littered with books. So there's a great book by Joseph Campbell called Goddesses, Mysteries of the Feminine Divine. So one of the challenges is like, okay, what is the power of, or what is the, let's just say this is going to be, possibly inflammatory. What is the value of the feminine? Is there value in the feminine? Is there value in the masculine? So when you're an AI and there is no male or female, what is the value of your lived experience? So Kira, gets uploaded into the AI. Okay, what is the value of her as being a female in the AI versus the males in the AI, right? Do you just morph it into something just, neutral? Is there a value in the bimodal distribution of experience? And so these are the sorts of topics that you can kind of imagine are probably challenging to explore in the nonfiction in today's environment, but in the fiction, you can start to explore them in interesting ways.
Right. Yes, that is right, because also you have to think about evolution and Darwin maybe, and it
Yes.
what helps. If you get down to human nature, or what helps like humans carry on, right? The basic thing is, maybe there is some worth to being female and male and having those together that
Mm-hmm.
carries that enables our race. No. species to, I don't know
Right.
why my words are, anyway,
No, no.
or
Yeah.
to keep going. Anyway, so yeah, very interesting topics. And
Well,
yeah,
and what you just brought up there is definitely something I'm going to be exploring. It's kind of like, think of the yin and the yang, right? The two halves making a complete whole. So, long story short, I do believe that there is an incredible value in the feminine, and I believe that it is, paired well with the masculine. The question is, what does that look like in an AI in the future? How do you pair those together? And so part of it is, so I have two daughters, and raising them to be powerful women in today's environment is kind of interesting, because there's a lot of interesting questions that aren't explored. So that's kind of what the book is honestly trying to do, is help me understand how to clearly articulate the value of the feminine, in a world that seems to kind of discredit it in a lot of ways.
yeah, there's no lots of issues, but yeah, yet to be explored, and like you said, a safe place to have
Hmm.
people think about them and
Yeah.
really think about how they feel about them, and just come up with their own ideas that way. So very exciting. And I think you touched on a little bit of this, but I love asking this question. I think, can you say in one sentence what you want someone to take away from your book?
Well, there's two things. So two
Okay, let's
sentences.
say.
Forgive me on this one. Number one, I would like them to not be sure which side they would pick, like to wonder, right? Like, I would say, if you walk away and say, I would be X, right? But then the main thing is that you learn a lot more about what it truly means to be human. How we are unique, how we are complicated, how we are, how many different things go into the way we even conceptualize the world. So two things. Number one would be unsure, and then number two would be understanding what it means to be human.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I think these topics are going to resonate with a lot of different people in the book world, and hopefully you will be back to tell us about your second and third book.
That would be awesome. I'd love that. This has been a great conversation.
Tell us where we can find you and your book.
Yep. So I'm on a lot of the different socials, except Twitter. Like, you can find me on Twitter. It's at Polymathic Being. And then I'm pretty active on LinkedIn under my full name, Michael P. Woudenberg. But the book's website is thesingularitychronicles.com. I also, as I mentioned, I write a lot of nonfiction on Substack. It's under Polymathic Being, the same as the Twitter handle. But the website is polymathicbeing.com. You can find me there. And I explore. So a lot of the topics that I'll be exploring in book 2, I'm already writing about on Substack. So again, science fiction meeting science fact. And then I have a readers group on Facebook. You can find it. It's the Fans of the Singularity Chronicles, and I'm sure we'll have the links in the show notes for those that are looking for it. But I'm pretty active on a lot of these different sites. I keep Facebook for personal reasons, like my own personal profile, but I'm pretty active on a lot of the other places.
Fun. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next book.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.